right, here we go. Hi, my name is Emily Pyeatt Arnold. I'm the journalism teacher and publications advisor at Alida High School in Alida, Texas. So I realized I was always telling my students that it's really easy to write a story if you've done a great interview, that a story can write itself if you've done these awesome interviews, that they shouldn't settle for lame quotes or can you get somebody to elaborate more? But I wasn't really giving them concrete methods or tools to approach their interviewing in a different way to help set them up for success. So, what did I do? I learned from the best. And I took lessons from mentors and teachers and compiled the pieces of those lessons here to share with you. So, I take no credit whatsoever for these ideas that I'm sharing with you today, but they're things that this year I tried with my students, and I think it really helped them in their approach to interviewing and reporting to help them head in the right direction. So we begin with the great Bobby Hawthorne, who says journalism isn't about writing, it's about reporting, and nothing happens until you talk to someone. So you've got to be fully present and you've got to go up and talk to people. And even if you're an introvert like me, you can learn some tricks of the trade to help you and feel more confident in this and be more successful in your interviews. Obviously, to rock an interview, you probably heard before, you need to prepare. You have to be flexible, you have to listen, and you have to be accurate. You've got to get the facts right. But there's some things that you can do in each of those steps along the way to help you master this as a craft. So first of all is starting strong. We know that first impressions matter, and I want you to think about how you've approached interviewing in the past. Can you admit to being a person that has only tried to interview people on DMs or texts? Have you ever gone up to somebody and said, hey, can you give me a quote about homecoming? Think about your approaches in the past and how successful you've been with those. I think it's important to obviously know some background information about your topic and about the people that you need to talk to first. Know how to spell their name. I know that sounds so silly in the beginning, but you need to know that in advance and know what their proper title is, whether grade, position in the sport that they play, or a teacher, the subjects they teach in their titles. Then after you make those initial introductions, one of the first things that I think is strong to lead with is asking, do I have your name spelled correctly? Let me check my notes, spell it back to you. This shows that you've done your research, you're prepared, you're intelligent, and you care enough to get the small details accurate, or the big details being the spelling of their name. This is going to make them feel valued and set you up for success right off the bat. Then I think it's important to lead with a meaningful piece of information about them. Maybe you've done a little bit of creeping, or you've done background research is what we call it, right? To help them open up. So if I know that I need to go talk to JoJo Earl, one of our star football players, maybe I lead with, hey JoJo, you spell your name like this. It's Gary Earl, JoJo, Jojo. Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, good. Well, JoJo, man, last Friday night when that game against Fossil Ridge, when you intercept that ball and you ran it back for a touchdown, that was incredible, man. And if you're starting with that, it shows that you care. Again, just one of those little tricks. If you are introverted, if you're shy, that can show that you care and get them to open up a little bit more right off the bat. The next thing that you want to do is ask if you can record them, and probably do this step a little bit higher up. If they say no, I encourage you to tell them how important it is to you that you get your facts right. Generally, that will convince somebody that it's okay to record them. Or you can just blame your teachers and say, look, it's a requirement for my journalism class that I have recordings. So once you get that permission, go ahead and get your voice memo going, and then get your reporter's notebook out. And I learned this tip from Corey Hale, and he says to go ahead and hold that phone with your voice recorder above your notepad, and then in your notebook, you're jotting down sensory observations while they talk. You're jotting down when they fidget, when they get nervous, when their eyes light up with excitement. Again, those sensory details that are going to bring your writing to life. You're not stressing about all of the things that they're saying word for word because you're recording them, right? And then when they do say something amazing, you're jotting down the times in your voice memo that you're going to go back and listen to, because I'm all about working smarter, not harder. And instead of listening to a huge, long interview, I've got these key moments that's what I want to go back to when I'm back in my classroom. And if you think you're really advanced and that sounds way too easy for you, you can try the Jedi mind trick method. Again, this is according to Corey Hale, and I'm not near as cool, and I can't really act it out here, but I'll do the best I can. So in the Jedi mind trick method, you've got your introductions, you've got your recorder going, you've spelled their name right, and you go in ahead and you're going to put that notebook in your back pocket. And then when they say something really interesting, oh my gosh, let me get that down exactly like you said it. I want to make sure I get this correct, and ask them to repeat it. So then you're jotting down that, or you're jotting down the time when they said that. And then you're putting the notepad back in your back pocket. Okay, cool. And then you're talking in your conversation. Oh my gosh, let me get that. So what this signals to your interviewee is that when they say something good, you're going to get your notepad back out, but then you're going to put it back out. And that subconsciously signals to them that they're going to want to keep talking about the good stuff. Okay, for this next part, let's think about how to ask better questions. And this comes from the text, Find Your Why. So we know that it's important to ask open-ended questions because this lets the other person lead you. But I thought it was interesting that I often tell my students to ask the follow-up question, why, to get to people elaborate. And it wasn't until I read Simon Sinek's Find Your Why that oftentimes that's a really hard question for us as humans, that it's easier for us to answer questions that begin with what, even though we might be seeking that why kind of answer. So think about reframing your why questions like, what is it about? Fill in the blank. That really matters to you, instead of why does something matter to you. That simple reframing can simplify things for our interviewees. And you have to be okay to sit in silence. I know that those can be awkward sometimes, but emotions especially are really hard to articulate, and you've got to give people a little bit of patience and a moment for pausing. That might take them some time to find the right words. And it may take you some time to articulate your questions if your conversation is happening organically. And that leads me into this next part that comes from the Goss method of interviewing. Phrasing your questions as conversation invitations. Instead of having this scripted list of questions, have an idea of the type of conversation that you want to have and about what. And then tell me about, describe for me when, talk about, can you explain to me the process of. It's much more inviting than, let me check my list of questions. Okay. If you do have some questions, let's watch out for the ones with the st, okay? What was the best, the most, the worst, the least? Those can be really intimidating. If somebody asks me the best movie of all time or the best album, that freaks me out. I couldn't do that right off the bat. So understand that those kind of questions can make people nervous. We want to be careful of always avoiding those loaded questions and our opinions. Okay, let's be ethical, and let's not start with the bomb questions. We want to work up to crucial things. We don't want people to shut down on us. Again, it goes back to leading with meaningful pieces of information to get them comfortable. So let's not start off with super controversial things so that they don't shut down on us. And then let's reference Find Your Why again to ask questions to dig deeper. And I think that these questions in this section are really important to try to work into your practice in speaking with people. So for example, when blank happened, how did that make you feel? Okay, what is it about this experience that you absolutely loved or that made it special? If they say they loved cheer, well, what is it about cheer that you absolutely love? And then when they say that it's fun or they're my friends or they're my family, well, tell me what you mean when you say that they're like your family. What does that mean to you? Family is different for each of us, okay? Then if they give you that generic response to something, you say what happened made you feel nervous, but you've probably felt nervous before. So describe for me how this particular time it was different for you. Okay, again, that's one of those questions that I think you can, or statements really, that you can take with you into conversations to get people to open up even more. And I love this. I heard Scott Winter and David Knight talk about this year as a film buff. I love movies, but thinking about our stories as movies and making our writing cinematic. We should be able to say, this is a story about blank. This is a film about blank. And we should be able to know that right off the bat. Then I think sometimes if we approach our interviews knowing the kind of movie that we want to see, that can help us in guiding the types of questions that we want to ask them. So if you think about the 10 possible moments in that movie that you want to see about that story or that person, are there flashbacks that are going to help tell that story? Are there montages that are going to help convey emotions? Um, think about those scenes in the movie that are going to help you um, show readers your story and not tell them your story. I think that that's really cool. But what I do want you to do right now is to take a pledge with me. It's a little weird in this environment, but raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, as a true journalist, will never, ever go up to someone and say, "Give me a quote." Okay, people, that's so important. We've got to get beyond that. That confuses people. They think they have to quote the Beatles or Shakespeare. So let's get beyond that and throw that out of our vernacular. And then let's wrap it up the right way. The last question should always be, is there anything else you would like to add? Or is there anyone else you suggest I contact for an interview? You have to be understanding and willing and flexible that we talked about at the beginning, that might change everything for you. You might find out the angle of your story just in asking that last thing. And you have to be willing to start from scratch then, and that's okay. That's a good thing. After the interview, thank them for their time. If appropriate, send an email or a message or even a thank you card if they've really gone out of their way. Finally, I'm a big proponent of this as of this year. I think it's important to upload your audio, take photos of your notes, and keep a coverage folder, or as we call it, a cover my butt folder in Google. This is where you can reference to make sure you're being accurate. You can go back to these files when you need to as a reporter, but we keep them in our team drive, and it actually has already been something that's been beneficial this year. As a teacher, I can go and check the students' folders to know that they're doing interviews because that shows me that they're reporting. I never want to have to go and did they actually do this accurately? But I could if I wanted to. And it's been helpful this year when I had a parent call and question a story and how her daughter was interviewed. And she was asking, well, why was she even asked these types of questions? And I didn't know the full story, but I could go back in this virtual environment now, not being with my students, and I could go into that coverage folder. And we've got our team folders over here that you can see with each person and my staff having their own folder. And then within their coverage folder, they have all their files. And I could go and listen. And then I could have my students back and say, actually, this is how the conversation went. And this is why the story was the way it was. And so we were covered because of that. So I think that's just responsible journalism. And it's important to be accurate. Okay, just remember our schools are full of powerful stories, and people are. We often just don't know how to tell them, and we need to be present to get those stories and willing to listen to people that want to tell them to us. So when you think you're ready to write, there's some questions that you can ask yourself. What do you know? What do you think you know? Okay, what do you not know still at this point? Do you have enough sources? How can you be sure your information is accurate? Can that information be verified through non-human sources? And if it's somebody's personal story, you don't have to worry about that, of course, but I think if we're dealing with facts and figures, it's important. Did you check out your sources and their validity? If numbers involved, did you check those out? Are things spelled correctly? More importantly, why should you care about this story? Why should we as readers care? If you're a reporter working from your one idea, you should know this. But if you're an editor, you need to make sure that your reporters know that. Why should we care? Why should anyone else care? And what can we make people do to care more? What does this story mean? And the most important question of all is, if this story never made it to publication, would it matter? Okay, I think that's so important for you to ask yourself with every single thing that you write. And as my hero and mentor, Lori Oglesby, said, there are two types of writers, good writers and quitters, and you're all able and capable of writing well. I do feel like getting solid interviews from people allows you to do that in a strong and effective way. And good luck to you. Thank you so much for your time.